Cool. Well, we'll kick off this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world today. This webinar is how to extend and optimize your Esri environment. So Esri is the world's #1 GIS platform for a reason. Both Eli and I have started our careers or we used Esri tools over the years, and they have amazing functionality for a lot of things. However, it can be really expensive to scale up the usage and storage. It doesn't have to be though. So you can get the best of both worlds by cost effectively extending Esri's capabilities using Coordinates Cloud. With Coordinates, you can extend your Esri environment, you can unify data storage, data management, and access. You can reduce the cost and complexity and improve your system performance. And you can solve the geospatial data sharing for projects and for clients that do not have Esri licenses. So today I'm going to blast through some slides, then Eli is going to show you a short overview of the Coordinates platform, and then all the ways that Coordinates works and interacts with the Esri ecosystem. If you have any questions, you'll have a look at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A button. If you could please jump in there, send us through your questions. I'll answer any that I can while the webinar is going, and we'll save some for the end, and Eli and I can discuss them. If we don't know them because they're too technical, we'll take them offline and follow up with you at a later time. And this webinar will be recorded and we will send out a recording to everybody who's registered. So anyone who couldn't make it today, you'll still get a recording. So I'm Anne Harper. I'm the Chief of Staff here at Coordinates. I run all of the sales and account management processes. And this is Eli Chadwick, our sales engineer.
Hello.
So yeah, a quick overview of Coordinates. The idea is that it is your data platform. So you have your own branded data portal, and the idea is that you can then provide self-service access to all of your customers, collaborators, and users. Users can preview and export your data into their favorite formats. So that's great for your Esri users, can take their favorite formats, and your engineers might be using CAD software and they can take DWGs. We have a wide range of formats and we are there to get people the data that they need. So we're quite vendor neutral. And it has automatic coordinate transformation, so people can make sure that they're using the coordinate system that they're using in their projects, and the coordinates engine will do that translation for them. APIs are automatically created. So what that means is if you load up a data set into Coordinates, people can download it, as I just explained, in their format, or they can choose to take it as a service or API. And one of those, which we're going to cover today, is the Esri REST API. Coordinates is in the cloud, so this means you don't have to worry about IT restrictions because there's no desktop app or API that's required, but you can have those things if you need. It also means Coordinates will scale when you need it. So if you have a really large project come along, you don't have to think about all the licensing, the credits, the hardware that you might need to, say, scale an Arc Enterprise instance. It all happens in the cloud. It is secure. We are ISO certified for their data management standard. We also have a role-based control architecture. So what that means is you, as the owner, allow the permissions that you want for all the data sets and services. So you can have a limited group of sensitive data and you make sure that only those people can see it. So you have complete control of that. And here's a quick overview of how it works. If you have your data over here, we support imagery, point clouds, 3D tiles are coming soon, and then your traditional vector, raster, and grid data, documents, all those things that you need for your geospatial modeling. You can load it up into, say, this is your cloud site through the data management web app. Then your customers can come along and take it in whatever format they want. So again, they go into the portal or they're able to take an API, or over here, we do mention that they can choose an ETL tool like FME. But yeah, so your Esri users are likely to want the data portal for their file geodatabases or the Esri REST services. We also sit on cart, but that's a whole nother webinar, so I won't go there. And just a quick overview of how Esri REST services work from coordinates. If this is your cloud site here with all your data formats, again, you've got your self-service data portal where people can take the data sets and download them into their software and apps like CAD, or your REST services may be, there's services that they can use. So other services and APIs, as well as REST APIs, which will serve all your Esri users. So I'm going to stop my slides there and hand over to Eli to give us a tour.
Cool, thank you, Anne. All right, so what I'm going to do today is just take you through most of the touch points that the Coordinates platform has with Esri things. I'm going to grab a bit of data from this site, I'm going to load it into a custom site, and then I'm going to pipe it off into ArcGIS Online just to show you sort of an end-to-end flow of how things work. This is somewhat of a follow-on from our previous webinar. So in the last webinar, we took you through how to set up a site from scratch. So I'm starting where I left off. If you want to know more about that, then give us a yell and we can send you a link to that webinar. But in any case, if you did catch the last one, this is a natural follow-on from that. So Coordinates is a multi-tenanted environment based out of AWS. When you take out a plan with Coordinates, you get one of these things. It's a portal, and this is one of our government customers. They've got many, many thousands of layers up here, of which I am going to grab one. So yeah, they've got almost 3,000 layers. Just briefly before I go on, we support vector data, point clouds, so layers and LAS, raster data, and grid data. Those are our primary geospatial formats. As Anne mentioned, we've got a few more coming, which is going to be great. We're moving more into the 3D space. But today we're talking Esri. So by way of navigation, we've got a data button and a map button. Data turns the data browser on and off. Map turns the map on and off. You can have multiple maps across the bottom. So essentially the beginning of your journey is to find some data. So I'm looking for some buildings data today. There's a bunch of different ways I can filter that. I can do a free text search. I can use these filters down the side. I've found the layer that I'm after. So I can open up that data card. There's a bit of information here about it. This is all to help me with my appraisal of the data. Let's just assume it's what I want. We've got a services and APIs tab here. This has a bunch of different services that are available. I'll go into those in more depth later. But for now, I'm going to add this data to the map. Now, this other site that I've got is Mortiti Island, which is a small island off the coast of exactly where I live. So I can do a search here for Mortiti. I'll find that. That's a global geocoder. You can find whatever you're looking for across the world. This is the island which I want the data for. The reason I've zoomed into it is because I'm about to do a crop of the data. I don't need the entire data set. All I need is a small amount. As you can see, this map button adds the layer to the map. These are points. No, they're not. They're building outlines. So polygons. I've actually, if I zoom out, got the whole countries in there. That's why I don't need them all. I'm just going to come on in and do a crop of the stuff that I actually need. So now that I've got the layer in here, I can actually close out of the data browser, go into a map only view, hit zoom in and just get the stuff I'm into. To grab the data that I want, come up, hit export. That crop is applied. The create export button is enabled. I'm told this is going to be a very small data set, which is exactly what I want. So Esri things. There's a number of different formats that I can pull this data out as. I can get it as an Esri shapefile. I can get it as a bunch of other things. We attempt to be vendor agnostic where possible. So we're trying to feed data into all the different ecosystems. This webinar is about Esri, so I'm going to select an Esri file geodatabase to export my data. Next step, hit the create export button. And what's happening in the background is the server is creating a file geodatabase for me. It is chopping the data out of the data store. I didn't mention it, but I could have reprojected it over here. I'm happy with NZTM, but wherever you live around the world, you will get presented with the way that it actually works is the data is stored in the CRS that the publisher's stored it in. So odds on it being in your country, it'll be stored in a datum that makes sense for you. If it is not, you can always drop down and select something else. And we'll use GDAL, so all the EPSGs are sorted. So that export is slowly being created for me. If I jump out of here and go up into my exports here, and I've got an export sitting there, so I can say, great, let's grab a copy of that. It's going to download the data set. It's now sitting in my downloads folder over here. Job done. So I've now got, I guess we can have a look at what we've got in there. In my downloads, I've got a zip file. In the zip file, I'm going to have a FileG database. In my FileG database is all those funky Esri things that they put in there. But all I need is the root of that. And I can go ahead and start considering loading that into my site that I've created. So we're done with LINs for there. For now, I can close that out. Let's go into my new site. I've mentioned the data button and the map button. Because I'm an administrator, which you would surely need to be to do the things I'm about to do, I've got a manage button. So if I hit my manage button, this takes me into the back end of coordinates. So what I want to be doing, well, a couple of things I will mention because they come up quite a lot and people are quite curious because we've got a different type of licensing model to Esri. People are always like, do I need an end user license? How does this work? So what we do is we have a system of groups and users. This process goes, we'll have a group that I created last time, but essentially you come up here and say create group, make your group. I go in there, I've got a group. From here, I just add users to it. The users could have been invited from invite user, or people can come to your URL and sign up and get granted membership if they're allowed it. That's how you do your groups and your users, and then I'll show you later how you assign permissions to layers and explain how that correlates with APIs and service access and so forth. So I will cover that off. It's just not super relevant right now. How do I get the data up onto the site? For that, we head over to upload. In this instance, I am going to simply go find the data set that I just downloaded. Hit open. I'm going to assign it to an owning group. These are the folks that can make changes to the data set and hit upload. We scan the incoming data set, make sure that all the geographies are OGC compliant. If we find anything wrong, we're not going to even bother putting it in. We'll generate a help desk call. So there is the data set. So I have a zip file with a FileG database in it. Inside the FileG database, I see the GDB, and in the GDB, I have discovered a data set. You could have put a bunch of different data sets into your FileG database. You could have multiple layers in there, and then you could work through importing them one at a time, or you could do them one per zip file. It's really up to you. I'm not doing any raster data today, but again, you would just zip that up with multiple tiles, and you can import that as well. So now that I've selected the data set, let's hit import. This was called New Zealand Building Outlines. I'm not interested in the whole of New Zealand because I cropped it off. So I'm going to rename that to More City, which is the island that I'm going to import. It's harvested the metadata out of the import file. I'll just leave that there. That's all good information and it's still relevant, even though I've got a subset of the data. And there's a bunch of things in here. I'm not going to bother showing you them right now, but because I want to hit import and get that going. So that'll start cruising on in. I do not have to hang around and wait here. I can let that slowly cook away. That shouldn't take too long. There's not a lot of data in here, so it should only take a couple of minutes. In any case, while that is happening, I'll move on to the next thing I was going to show you, which is, so just to summarize what I've done there, I've exported as FileG database. Handy. If you're an Arc Pro user, FileG databases are probably one of the preferred formats you're going to use. You could have grabbed it as a shapefile if you don't mind column headers that are only 8 characters long. But yeah, I think if I was using Arc Pro, I'd probably go for the FileG database option. Then I've imported a FileG database, again, quite handy for Esri folk. We can take data in most of the formats that we can export it as. So you can put it in as a CSV, you can put it in as a map info tab. You can use geo packages, a bunch of different ways of getting data in there. Again, vendor agnostic. So the next thing I want to do while that's cooking away is head on over to data sources. I'm going to configure a data source. Let's have a look at what I want to show you here. So if I just go to paste, this is a Esri Arc. Well, you never know what it is exactly. It might be an enterprise, could be server. Probably, I think it's enterprise, but it's the classic standard sort of Esri setup of a bunch of folders, and inside of the folders, we've got a bunch of different subfolders, and in the subfolders, you can go find the layers that you're into. I'm after this multi protection area reference points layer. To get at it, if I head back to configure data sources, I'm going to select do data source. Just quickly while I'm in here, there's a bunch of different methods that you can ingest data. Amazon S3, ArcGIS REST endpoints, Postgres, Arc, WFS, so web feature service. Today, we're going to use exactly the URL that I just dropped in the browser. So I'll paste that in here. That's going to take me to the same exact place as this. I'm going to give it a title, and I'll just call it Esri Service. I'm going to assign it to the multi group again and hit connect. So what's happening here is our ArcGIS server reader is connected to the endpoint that I just dropped in there. It's doing a scan. It's going to scan that whole entire data server and return to me all of the feature services that are available or are published on that service. Once it's done that, I'll be able to go in there and grab some data off it. So we give updates as it's scanning. It's saying here, look, I found a bunch of things. I found this, I found this, I found this. It's going to rip through and just discover all of the things. It's really just scraping metadata at this point, and it's going to then allow me to make a decision about which particular things I want to get. So that's finished. Good news. So I can head over. So once you've configured that, we head over to browse sources. I'm going to look into my Esri service here, and I find they have 20 maps. Inside there is the environment. Now I've got to go down and find my data sets. I think it was in here under, it wasn't. It was under, if I go back to the, it's like it's under Regional Coastal Environmental Plan Operative. So let's find that. Yeah. And then now if I go down, it actually, what we've done is alphabetized it. So you can search by alphabet quickly. Now I want to find these reference points. There they are there. I hit import. It's a big long name for it. I'm going to give it a slightly smaller name. Let's just delete that and leave it at multi protection area reference points. At this point, I could fill out the description. It's a bunch of different things I could do. I'm not going to do them now. It's not imperative that you do them on import. In fact, I'd almost advise to not put a ton of work into this particular part of the page. I would just go, let's import it. Once you've got it in, then you can go back and assign all of these bits and pieces to it. The reason I say that is you may be importing something that's really big with many gigabytes of data. That server may restart, which will cause an error. You'd have to repeat the process. So why waste too much of your precious time now when you can always come back and do it later? Case in point, so that's going to take not very long at all. These are just points around a small island, around a small nation, so it shouldn't take too long. If I go back into manage data, again, you don't have to wait around there. I can see that that is publishing here. If I go into my multi building outlines, I can see that the building outlines have been imported. If I wanted to, I could go down here and set all of these values now. One gotcha though is if you want to be doing auto updates on a layer, you want to set that primary key when you do the import. But I don't need to fill all of these out. It's kind of besides the point right now, but I guess the fact of the matter is all of these bits and pieces here are going to contribute to what you see at the other end on the data browser. So if I go into the data browser and we open up a layer that I pulled in the last webinar, if I just cruise down here, all of these things here are bits that you can populate on the on that card that I was just looking at. Let's go have a quick look, make sure that that other layer has come in, which it has. Excellent. So next thing I'm going to do is head back to the front end. I'm going to build a quick map viewer here. So put a bunch of layers in it, and then we'll head off to Esri land and start doing basically the same thing over here, just to show you how Coordinates does it and how you can then use a goal to achieve basically the same outcome. There's a few minor differences. So I'll do it even in the same order, just so that it makes a bit of sense. I've got a digital elevation model here. I'm going to add that to the map. There we have that. If I just show you quickly underneath it, there is Morty Island, there is Small Island. Got pillar diving all around here. That's besides the point. I've got my building outlines. Let's add that. These are the things that I just imported through that file database. I'll come down a little further. It's a long layer. Let's get rid of that. No, in fact, grab this one, multi diving outlines. These are the protective area reference points. Put them in. Those are all out in the water here. And then just to finish it off, I've got two more. I've got some place names. These came in the last webinar. You need to know how to do the labeling. That's covered in the last webinar. And I'll add these protection zones, which essentially are polygons joining up those reference points. So there I have my map viewer. How do I do that in Esri? If I zoom out, you'll see the rest of the country doesn't have any data. That's because I cropped it. So in here I have protection zones, and then I've got a DEM, and I've got a DEM, DEM, yes, and I've got my building outlines. So now I am going to recreate that in Esri using feature services. Where do I get these feature services from, you ask? Well, if I open up the info tab for one of the layers, I go into the services and APIs tab. We've got a bunch of different services in here, WFS. So the way that it works under the hood, when you load any data into Coordinates, it automatically is going to generate services appropriate to its data type. So this here is vector data. It's got a WFS. If I put a style on it, we would have generated some WNTS. So I'd have some of those to put in, some tiles. Raster are tiles by default, so they will have tiles in here as well. And then of most relevance to this particular talk, the feature service. So that's just bold standard feature service. If I grab a copy of it, drop it into a browser, here we have the feature service. And that is how I'm going to be interfacing with ArcGIS Online. So we can close this down and finish with them. We've pulled the data off it. If I wanted to, I could go back and get other layers off that. That data source is configured and locked in. So it's there for all eternity until I remove it. Here we are in ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to build a web map. So I'm not really an ArcGIS Online expert, but I know enough to do some things. So we'll open this up. This is a map, a web map. The way AGOL works is you build a web map and then you plug that into a web app, and then you publish that, and you either publish it publicly, in which case the world can see it, or you publish it to named users. One of the catches there is the named users need to have an Esri license. A lot of people in the world do, so that works pretty well. But if they don't, you're either going to have to get them to buy one, or you're going to have to give them one of yours. So that's a little thing to bear in mind. So let's add some data to the map. I'll head on back to here. Firstly, I think I'll grab the DEM. So the DEM, if I open up the info tab, as I mentioned, this has a WMTS. I'll just explain while I'm here, actually. This is another question that we get asked quite a lot, is how does authentication work with basically all our data, Esri as well. The way that it works is I am logged into the site by virtue of having either been invited or just registering and setting up a password. So up here, I can see that I'm logged in. That gives me what we call a coordinates ID. If I want to interact programmatically with these layers, then I have to come in here and create an API key. That involves basically give it a name. In order to do programmatic interaction, you only need data access only. I'll just quickly explain that there's a manual scope as well. So everything I'm doing is backed by an API. You can create an API yourself and do all of the things. To do those things, say you wanted to have document access, you need to enable that. If you wanted table and layer access, so say for instance, you wanted to automate the publishing of data, you'd want to come in here and say full access to tables and layers. Same goes with sets, data sources, and exports. So you can choose your own scope here and then create yourself a key. I'm just going to go with data access only. In fact, I'm not even going to bother making one because I've already got one sitting here. If it's a non-admin, you can reveal it and look at it. If it's an admin key, take a copy, put it somewhere safe. You don't want to share your keys around. If someone else gets it, they can be you, essentially. So that needs to be carefully managed. And then if you had a collection of keys here, you could pick which one you want to use. I only have one. It plugs that key into the URL. So this is the WNTS capabilities URL. That is the one that I need to get this DEM into AGOL. I'll come back over here. The way you get your data in here, I'm sure you guys already know about this, but add layer from URL. There's a bunch of different URLs you can enter in here. You throw that in, it says, right, I see that's a WMTS. I say that is right. Put it in there. It's only got one layer in there. I'm going to add that to my map. So now the DEM's in. It's in. Next up, I want to add another layer from URL, for which I'll need to come back here and grab the URL. If I go over to place names, click on info, open up the data card, pop over to services and APIs, and come on down to now we're talking Esri REST services, feature service. Again, we've got the API key plugged in there. So theoretically, it's possible for you to create a map using your API key, but then you can publish that on, because it's using your identity to grab the data out of coordinates, you can then configure the sharing from an AGOL perspective irrelevant of that. So that's another thing to bear in mind. You might have a layer that you've got access to that you don't want to share with the world, so you'll just have to be mindful of how you do that. We basically say, all right, you've got an API, you're allowed to see that. Great. What happens over in Esri land is up to Esri. So now I'll add that layer to the map. Again, it picks up, this time we have a ArcGIS server web service, which I'm happy to see is understood. Add that to the map. Now the styles that I'd added to that, they have the labels on it. Those styles are peculiar to coordinates and to any tile service that you call from coordinates. This is not a tile service, this is an Esri REST service. So if I wanted to replicate that, I'd have to go into labels and say, I want to add a label class. It'll pick up that it's a name. I'm happy with that. I also want to grab those. I'll just do one more. I don't need to do all of them. You get the point, I think, but I'll get one more just for the sake of repetition. Now the Esri REST, grab the URL, head back over here, do the same thing. Paste it in. It should pick up that it's a feature service. It has, add it to the map. Great. So now we're getting there. At this point, I'm just going to save this map. Let's save it. Give it a name. Let's call it Multi Web Map. I like to mention Web Map because generally, as you'll see in the next step, what I'm going to do is add that to a web app. So if I go back to my contents, in fact, we can just close right on out of there. If I go back to my contents, in here I've got my web map. I can open that up. Have a look at it. That will always be sitting there. The reason I called it a web map is because the next thing I want to do is create a web app. I'll just go with the simple one, instant apps. And a basic one will do, but the point being is you could have done all of those fancy different types of web apps. You can pick all of these different types of templates. That's feature service will just feed on into whichever one you select. Now I'm going to create my app. There's a few things I have to do in here, but it's pretty much ready to go as is right there. In fact, what I could just do is just ignore all these things and hit publish. You can go and do all of those things, but the kind of point I'm trying to make here is that you can have your data and coordinates and feed it into an AGOL web map, which has happened. So now when I hit conf, you could grab it, embed it into an iframe. Depends on how what exactly your use case is. In any case, that there is now a web map embedded into a web app, and you can now go back to the interface and do all the different types of levels of sharing. I mentioned before, you're going to need licenses for your end users if you privately share it. If you publicly share it, then happy days, but most people don't want to make their data completely public. So just need to be mindful of how you're going to approach that. But essentially, we've got a web map, and it's on the internet, and it's feeding data out of our coordinate system. Final thing I'm going to do, which is slightly less Esri-ish, is I'm just going to show you what the equivalent maneuver in coordinates land would look like. So I've got a map here. I've got all my layers in there. It's virtually the same as what we were talking there. I like to turn it into 3D just because 3D is cool. So now I've got a 3D map that's totally able to do views in, views out. And this map, I'm going to give it a name. Island. Save that. So now I've got a named map. At the moment, this is just a map viewer. It is private to me. Every time I go away and come back, there it will be. I can have mini maps along the bottom here. You can make a bunch of these. Handy way of like referencing data that you're interested in. So when you go back to the site, you don't have to rebuild this. It's just going to be sitting there. As an admin, I've got the option to hit this share button. So this is new functionality that's getting rolled out pretty shortly. We've got 3 options down here. Not published, that means not published. That is actually a method for unpublishing a map that you have shared. Private. This is how you're going to share the data with people that are in a group. So I've got my group Mortity. What I would do back at the ranch is add users to this group. Any of those users will then have access to these data layers. Each of these data layers I've got owned by Mortity, which means that that people in that group by default have access to those layers. So what I'm going to do next is hit share. This is the equivalent maneuver to all the things I was just doing to create my web map, put it into my web app. So I've done virtually the same thing in both different systems. I just wanted to show you how you do that in coordinates. I've now created that. I don't know if I didn't mention, but what I did do is I grabbed a copy of the URL. If I go back into data, what this means is under data types, there will now be a new data type called map viewer. This is the map that I've created. I can close it. We're done with that. So that's now a configured map viewer that I can share with other folk. How do I share it? I grab that URL. I can go back and grab it again if we need to, but I've already got it in my clipboard. I can email that to people. And so long as they are in the correct group, have the permissions to the layers, they can receive this, drop it into a browser, and without knowing anything at all about coordinates, they get the data that they need packaged together. Still got that kind of cool 3D thing going on. And from here, I can do all the things that I was showing at the very beginning. So I can open up the data cards. I can come in here and export the data. Got a grid in there. I can grab that out as different types of grid formats. I can say, I don't want a shapefile, I want a geopackage. I could get it as KML, DWG, PDF. And then I also can go to the services, and at this point we remind that user, hey, you sure you want to download it? You could maybe choose to access it through one of these means instead. So they could set up their own API key, access the layer programmatically, or they can just, as I mentioned, go in here and download it as whatever format they're after and re-project it. So just kind of a cool way of bundling all your data together, giving it to your users, not having to put them through what I don't think is very arduous process of learning how the system works, but nonetheless, if you just want to get data out to a stakeholder pretty quickly, that's a good way to do it. I think I'll park that there for now. I've just in summary, I've gone through exporting a file geodatabase, so Esri format, importing a file geodatabase, scraping data off an Esri server, enterprise server, and then piping it into ArcGIS Online using Esri REST services. So the thank you very much. Back to Anne.
Cool. Thank you for that, Eli. That was yeah, really interesting. Especially cool to see how it actually works in Esri, and you can actually prove that the services will work once you consume them in the Esri apps, and also the coordinates equivalent. So I just want to thank our audience for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and learning about coordinates. If you're interested in learning about how coordinates could work for your workflows or want to go into any detail with us, please do get in touch. We're available through coordinates.com. You can find our chat through there, or yeah, just reach out and we'll find you. And we can discuss your setup and organize a demo and how it might work best for you. So on that note, I will say good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are. And we hope to see you in a month's time. Eli, did we have we're doing aerial photography next month, aren't we?
Yeah, I think the next one's going to focus more on how you would go about delivering a bunch of different data that you've captured through different methods of UAV, drones, stuff like that. And hopefully we'll have some quite cool new formats that we can show off then.
Yeah, we're quite excited about those. So we're just lining up the next one before we've even finished this one. Cool. Okay, well, we'll catch you all next time. Thanks.